Moving on now to the Adjust panel. Now the Adjust panel has, as you can see, a lot of drop-down menus in here. Some of them are actually already repeated, if you like, in the Capture panel. But let's start again. Histogram we've already looked at, which is a repeat from the Browse. Exposure we've already looked at, which was in the Capture panel. White balance was also in the Capture panel. But now we're moving into sharpness adjustments. And if you feel your image needs a tiny little bit more bite of sharpness, you can go and add or reduce, if necessary, the sharpness as to suit your tastes in this particular panel. Adjustment layers we've already looked at. That's repeated here. Curves adjustment, if you've used Photoshop, then you'll be very familiar with using curves and how curves respond with dragging up, say, as I'm dragging up the midpoint of the curve here and adjusting the midtones while the black points and the white points of the image remain fixed. Or I can add additional dots on the curve to create an S-curve for adding contrast, etc. So those of you that are familiar with curves, you will find a curves adjustment panel to use here. If you want to get rid of those curve points, just simply click on the dot and press the backspace or the delete key to take the curve back to its original setting. Color correction, let's just pop this one out as a separate panel in this case. I often have the color correction panel out as a floating panel. And we can set in here our saturation amount. So you can see I'm increasing saturation, or I can increase vibrancy, which increases, basically enhances the lower saturated colors, the more nuanced colors. I generally, personally, use my saturation at about 6 to 8 on most of my images anyway, and I could create a preset so that it's always set at that. One of the great tools with the color correction is that you've got the color picker. You can go in and select a color, and you can see that's now showing that color on the color wheel here, and I can now go and change the saturation of just that particular color independently of everything else. And I can also choose to lighten that color if I want to, or darken that color if I want to, or even change the hue of that color. So there I can make that color more green, or I can make it more red, and I can shift that around using the saturation tool. I can create another color picker, select my blue background, for example, this time, increase the saturation there of my blue background independently from the rest of the shot, because there's nothing else blue in the picture. Obviously, if there was something else blue in the picture within that particular blue value, it would also be affected by what I was doing. So that's the color correction tool. If you want to reset the tools, just double click them. They go back to their 0 point. If you want to get rid of the points, click on the dot that you created and hit the delete key, and they will disappear. Greyscale. This is if you want to work on the images in black and white. Notice that this is unchecked. If I check it, then the image becomes black and white, and then I can adjust my mix and balance of the red, green and blue channels to create a black and white look that I particularly like. Obviously, I don't want black and white on these, so I'm going to uncheck the grayscale. Noise filter. We're going to come back to this one because there's also the moire reduction for removing moire from fabrics, textures, that sort of stuff. Very, very well controlled moire in the Phocus software. I'll come back to that one a little bit later. Dust removal. Now, sometimes when we're working with our cameras, we get dust on the sensor of the camera. Now, with a medium format camera, it's really easy because we can actually just take the back of the camera off and clean it. But if, for example, you didn't notice the dust until after the shoot, you can go in and you can specify, right, I've got a piece of dust here, and you can specify the size of the bit that you want to fix as well. You can say, right, I've got another one here. And then you can apply the amount of correction, if you like, on that dust to remove that dust. And then you can apply that correction to every other image that has dust in the same place, because it's quite common when you shoot a series of images that the dust appears in one particular place on your background, and then you see it repeated in exactly the same place in the same place. So you can use this tool to remove the dust on not just one image, but on a whole series of images if you forgot to clean the sensor.